Okay, let's dive into a story that starts with a gut feeling and spirals into something truly chilling. Imagine finding your partner's private thoughts, the raw, unfiltered stuff they jot down when they think no one's looking. Most of the time, maybe it's just work stress, daily annoyances, maybe even some sweet things. But what if you found something darker? Something so disturbing it makes you question everything you thought you knew about the person sleeping next to you. That's exactly what happened in this story, titled on Reddit, I train to y tres f, read my husband's train to y Syed M journal, and in it he says that he hates me and hopes I die. Yeah, you heard that right. And the video title captures the essence perfectly. I found my husband's secret journal where he wished I would die, but is doing a lot of heavy lifting here because this story takes a turn you won't see coming. So let's set the scene. We have a 33-year-old woman, let's call her Sarah, and her 37-year-old husband, let's call him Mark. They've been together for 4 years, married, and they even have a baby together. From the outside, maybe things looked okay, but like most relationships, they had their ups and downs. Mark, her husband, had this habit: he kept a journal. Not religiously, but semi-regularly throughout their relationship. And here's a key detail: he didn't hide it. It wasn't locked away in some secret drawer, it was just there. Sarah knew about it, but she'd always respected his privacy. Until one day she just couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. It started after a fight. We don't know the specifics of the argument, but Sarah describes it as a heated conversation. You know those arguments? The kind that leave a bad taste in your mouth, a knot in your stomach, and a feeling that something isn't quite right. That's where Sarah found herself. After Mark left for work, the house felt quiet, but her mind was racing. She writes, my gut told me to read it. That little voice, that intuition we sometimes try to silence, was screaming at her. And this time she listened. She found the journal, the one she'd never touched before, and opened it. Maybe her hands were shaking a little. Maybe she felt a pang of guilt for crossing that line, violating his privacy. But that gut feeling was stronger. And what she found inside, well, it shattered her world. It wasn't just one entry. He wrote several times that he hates her. Let that sink in. Not just frustration, not just anger vented in the heat of the moment, but pure written down hatred for his wife, the mother of his child. But it got worse, much worse. There was one specific entry written when Sarah had been sick. Instead of concern, instead of care, he wrote that he hoped she would die. He wished for her death. Can you even imagine reading those words? From the person you built a life with, the person you share a home and a child with. The shock, the horror, the betrayal, it must have been overwhelming. Sarah's reaction was immediate and visceral. She didn't sit there analyzing it, she didn't try to rationalize it. The moment she read those words, she knew she couldn't stay. She packed up her things, packed up their baby, and left. She didn't go home to her parents, she went to a friend's place, a safe haven. But before she left, she did something crucial. She took pictures of all the pages containing those hateful words. Proof, evidence. Something to hold on to, maybe for herself, maybe for later. To her husband, she kept it vague. She texted him saying she just needed some space to cool off after their conversation and that she'd be home soon. A necessary lie, perhaps, to buy herself time to figure out her next move without him knowing the real reason she fled. Because her mind was already racing ahead. While staying at her friend's, she immediately booked an appointment with her therapist's smart move, and she contacted a lawyer. She wasn't just cooling off. She was preparing for the end of her marriage, preparing to protect herself and her baby. Now here's where the but in the title starts to come in, where the situation gets a bit more complicated, at least in Sarah's mind at that moment. As she's reeling from this discovery, trying to process the fact that her husband wished her dead, she starts thinking about the context. They had hit a rough patch recently. She describes it as lasting about 2 weeks, a dark time, but she emphasizes that they seemed to pull through it. Importantly, she notes, there was no violence, no moments where I was afraid of him, just sincere conversations about difficult feelings. This context is key. It wasn't a relationship marked by physical abuse or overt threats. It was, seemingly, a period of intense emotional turmoil they had navigated together. And here's the kicker, the journal entries filled with hatred, the ones wishing her dead, they corresponded exactly with that 2-week rough patch. The timing lined up perfectly. Outside of those specific venomous entries, the rest of the journal was normal. Tame, even. It reflected the Mark she thought she knew and loved. It was filled with little self-pep talks about work, notes about family stuff, goals he wanted to achieve, habit tracking, the kind of mundane, everyday stuff you might expect to find in someone's journal. So you have these incredibly violent, hateful thoughts concentrated in one specific period of difficulty, surrounded by pages and pages of normalcy. It's jarring. It creates this cognitive dissonance. Is the real Mark the one who wrote those horrible things, or is he the man reflected in the rest of the journal, the one she built a life with? Adding to her confusion were Mark's messages. Since she left, he'd been sending her texts. Not angry texts, not demanding texts, but warm messages. He said things like he was glad she was taking space for herself, that he looked forward to reconnecting when she came home, that it's okay for couples to have little hiccups, and of course that he loved her. These messages, combined with the seemingly isolated nature of the hateful entries and the normalcy of the rest of the journal, started to make her waver. She admits it herself. I was sure our relationship was over the moment I read that he hates me, or even the moment I felt the need to violate his privacy, but the warm messages and the rest of the journal have me wavering a little. This is the crux of her dilemma. Could this just be venting? An extreme, unhealthy, terrifying form of venting, yes, but venting nonetheless. She acknowledges the need to blow off steam when things get tense. Journaling is often recommended as a healthy outlet for processing difficult emotions. We all say things in anger or frustration, maybe think dark thoughts for a fleeting moment when we're pushed to our limit. But wishing your spouse dead, fantasizing about their death when they're sick, Sarah grapples with this. She says, never in even our darkest moments have I fantasized about his death. Splitting up maybe, but this feels so sinister. That word sinister hangs heavy. It's not just anger, it feels like something deeper, something colder. She poses the question directly to the Reddit community. Is this just healthy venting and I'm overreacting here? Has anyone else had similar thoughts about a spouse that they then got over? Or is this a man I need to protect myself and my baby from? If so, is there anything I'm missing? She's looking for perspective, for validation, for answers, because the ground beneath her feet has completely given way. How could she ever feel safe around him again, knowing he harbored those thoughts, even if it was only during a rough patch? How could she sleep next to someone who wished her dead? And just when you think the situation can't get any more disturbing, Sarah adds an edit to her post. An edit that changes everything. Remember that rough patch, the one that coincided with the hateful journal entries? It wasn't just vague, difficult feelings. She reveals the specific cause. The rough patch was about his feelings for another woman. Oh, okay. He didn't cheat physically, she clarifies, but he did have an inappropriate conversation with this other woman, which he eventually confessed to. And the most chilling part, the entry where he wrote that he hated Sarah and wished she would die, it wasn't just random venting. She writes, the part where he says he hates me was written as a love letter to her. Let that sink in. He was writing a love letter to another woman, and as part of expressing his affection for her, he wrote about hating his wife and wishing for her death. He didn't just wish her dead. He wrote, he thinks about me dying and being replaced by the other woman. This context is absolutely crucial. This wasn't just blowing off steam about marital frustrations in a private journal. This was him actively fantasizing about his wife's death so he could be with someone else. He was constructing a narrative in his mind, a scenario where Sarah conveniently disappears, paving the way for his new relationship. Suddenly, the healthy venting argument completely evaporates. This isn't venting. This is plotting, fantasizing about a future built on his wife's demise, all wrapped up in a love letter to another woman. The sinister feeling Sarah had, it wasn't an overreaction, it was spot on. Now let's turn to the Reddit comments because the community reaction was swift, strong, and almost unanimous. People were horrified and they did not mince words. The overwhelming consensus, this is not healthy venting, not even close. Wishing your spouse dead, especially in the context of wanting to replace them with someone else, is miles beyond normal anger or frustration. Several commenters immediately drew parallels to infamous cases like Chris Watts and Scott Peterson, men who appeared loving on the surface, but ultimately murdered their wives, often after starting affairs. Now that's a terrifying comparison, and it's not made lightly. The commenters weren't necessarily saying Mark would become violent, but they were highlighting the extreme danger signal inherent in his thoughts. Fantasizing about a partner's death to facilitate a new relationship is a massive, waving red flag that has, in the most tragic cases, preceded actual violence. The sentiment was clear. This isn't just dark thoughts. This is potentially dangerous thinking. One commenter brought up research suggesting that a woman's intuition, her gut feeling about potential violence from her partner, is actually a remarkably strong predictor. Sarah's initial gut feeling that told her to read the journal. The feeling that something was deeply wrong, the commenters urged her to trust that instinct implicitly. It wasn't paranoia, it was self-preservation kicking in. Her subconscious might have been picking up on subtle cues long before she found the concrete proof in that journal. And what about those warm, loving messages Mark was sending after she left? The ones saying he was glad she was taking space, that he loved her, that he looked forward to reconnecting. While these messages initially caused Sarah to waver, the commenters saw them in a much harsher light, especially after the reveal about the other woman. Many suggested these texts were pure manipulation. He wasn't genuinely concerned. He was trying to smooth things over, control the narrative, maybe even lull her into a false sense of security. One particularly cynical but perhaps realistic take was that he was actually glad she was taking space, because it gave him more freedom to pursue the other woman he was writing love letters to. His support wasn't support at all, it was convenient for his secret desires. The advice pouring in wasn't about reconciliation, it was about safety. People urged Sarah to take extreme precautions. Do not be alone with him was a common refrain. Share the photos of the journal pages with trusted friends or family, maybe even her lawyer, with explicit instructions about what they mean essentially, creating a safety net in case something happened to her. The fear was palpable in the comments. If he's capable of writing this, what else is he capable of? The fact that he fantasized about her being replaced felt particularly chilling to many. Personal anecdotes also surfaced. One commenter shared their own experience of finding hateful messages from a partner. They emphasized the devastating impact. It's impossible to recover from such a revelation. Once you know someone has harbored those kinds of thoughts about you, the trust is irrevocably broken. You can't unknow it, you can't unread those words. The feeling of safety is gone, potentially forever. This resonated deeply with Sarah's own fear about never feeling safe around him again. Others chimed in about journaling norms. Many people journal and many use it to vent frustrations about their partners during rough patches. But the commenters were clear, there's a line. Venting about annoyances or even contemplating separation is one thing. Actively wishing death upon your partner, fantasizing about them dying so you can be with someone else, that's not normal, that's extreme. It indicates a level of contempt and detachment that is deeply alarming. One intriguing comment suggested that perhaps Mark subconsciously wanted Sarah to find the journal. Why else wouldn't he hide it better, especially if it contained such explosive material? Maybe on some level he wanted her to know the truth of his feelings, even if consciously he was playing the part of the loving husband. It's a disturbing thought that the discovery wasn't entirely accidental, but a passive-aggressive way for him to reveal his true self without having to confront her directly. So let's piece this all together. Sarah starts with a gut feeling after an argument. She violates her husband's privacy by reading his journal, something she'd never done in 4 years. She finds entries where he says he hates her and wished her dead when she was sick. Her immediate reaction is to flee with her baby, contact a lawyer, and book therapy. She's initially sure it's over. But then doubt creeps in. The hateful entries were confined to a recent 2-week rough patch. The rest of the journal seems normal, like the man she knows. He's sending warm, seemingly supportive texts. Could it just be extreme venting? Is she overreacting? Then comes the devastating edit. The rough patch was about his feelings for another woman. The death wish wasn't just venting, it was part of a love letter to the other woman, explicitly fantasizing about Sarah dying and being replaced. This context shifts everything. It's no longer about blowing off steam, it's about wanting his wife gone to make room for someone else. The Reddit comments overwhelmingly validate her fear. They confirm this is far beyond normal venting, draw terrifying parallels to men who murdered their partners, label the warm texts as manipulation, and urge her to prioritize her safety and trust her instincts. They reinforce that feeling unsafe is not an overreaction. It's a rational response to discovering such violent ideation directed at her, especially in the context of infidelity and replacement fantasies. Think about the emotional roller coaster Sarah must have been on. The initial shock and betrayal, the flicker of doubt and hope fueled by the tame journal parts and his texts. Then the crushing blow of the edit, revealing the true, sinister context. The validation from strangers online, confirming her worst fears weren't unfounded, but also amplifying the sense of danger. The question is no longer, is this healthy venting? The question is, how do I protect myself and my child from a man who fantasized about my death so he could replace me? The advice is clear. Lawyer up, trust your therapist, maintain distance, ensure others know what you found, and do not underestimate the potential threat. Those words, "I hope you die," written by the person who vowed to love and protect you, are impossible to erase. When coupled with the desire to replace you with someone else, they become more than just words. They become a potential blueprint for a terrifying future. Sarah's gut feeling wasn't just a hunch, it was a lifeline. Listening to it, taking those pictures, leaving immediately, contacting professionals, these weren't overreactions. They were the necessary first steps in escaping a situation that felt deeply, fundamentally unsafe. The story leaves us hanging in a sense. We don't know the ultimate outcome for Sarah and Mark, but the path forward for Sarah seems clear, guided by the chilling words she found and the stark warnings from the online community. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the darkest thoughts aren't just fleeting anger. They can be windows into a reality far more dangerous than we want to believe. Trusting your instincts, seeking help, and prioritizing safety, especially when children are involved, becomes paramount. This wasn't just a rough patch, it was a horrifying glimpse into a mindset that saw her not as a partner, but as an obstacle to be removed. And that realization changes everything.